What's one family saying or phrase you heard growing up that still sticks with you?
Picture this exact moment when my phone buzzed insistently on the kitchen counter in my modest Dayton home, pulling me away from the lukewarm cup of coffee I'd been nursing while reviewing property listings for the afternoon's open house showings, and there it was. The group text from Mom that landed like an emotional freight train derailing right in the middle of my otherwise ordinary Thursday morning 2 weeks before what was supposed to be Lisa's fairy tale wedding in the heart of suburban Columbus, her words carefully chosen to sting without outright admitting the resentment that had been simmering in our family for years. Declaring that I should stay far away from the ceremony because my mere presence had a notorious habit of igniting unnecessary drama that no one needed on such a joyous occasion. A sentiment that Lisa herself reinforced almost immediately with her quick reply laced with that self-righteous tone she mastered during our teenage years, agreeing emphatically that she deserved at least one day unmarred by the complications I apparently brought into every gathering, and as the chat thread exploded with responses from cousins and aunts throwing in their supportive laughs and knowing nods, it felt like the entire extended Thompson clan was collectively exhaling in relief at the prospect of a peaceful event without me there to supposedly disrupt the harmony they'd all pretended existed for so long. I paused there in the quiet of my kitchen, the sunlight filtering through the blinds casting long shadows across the granite countertop where scattered real estate flyers lay forgotten, feeling that familiar cocktail of hurt and indignation bubbling up from deep within. The kind that comes from being the steadfast sibling who had shouldered more than her fair share of family burdens over the decades, from bailing Lisa out of financial scrapes during her impulsive 20s to hosting those obligatory holiday dinners after Dad's passing when Mom's grief made her withdraw into silence, only to be repaid with this public shunning that reduced my contributions to mere footnotes in their narrative of victimhood, and instead of unleashing a torrent of defensive messages that would undoubtedly fuel their gossip mill for weeks, I crafted a response that carried a subtle edge of defiance wrapped in casual wit, typing out that if my attendance was such a threat to their bliss, then perhaps they wouldn't require the credit card I'd generously offered months earlier to cover a significant portion of the lavish reception costs at that upscale venue overlooking the Scioto River. Watching as the conversation continued its merry trajectory with more chuckles and eye-roll emojis from the peanut gallery, who had long since aligned themselves with the easier targets of affection, blissfully unaware that while they reveled in the imagined tranquility, I had already switched over to my banking application on the second screen of my laptop, my fingers moving with a deliberate calm born of too many overlooked slights, and initiated the freeze on that very card, effectively halting any pending transactions tied to the wedding expenses in a move that felt both liberating and laced with the petty satisfaction of finally wielding a tangible leverage point in a dynamic where I'd always been cast as the powerless outsider. The decision hung in the air like the steam rising from my reheated coffee, a quiet act of reclamation that echoed the countless times I'd bitten my tongue during family barbecues in our old backyard when Lisa would monopolize conversations with tales of her latest adventures while dismissing my career milestones as boring routine. Or when Mom would sigh dramatically about how my divorce had complicated things for everyone else, conveniently ignoring the emotional labor I'd invested in keeping the household afloat during those turbulent years following the split from my ex, who had vanished into his own midlife reinvention. Without a backward glance, and as I closed the app with a soft click, the weight of exclusion lifted just a fraction, replaced by an anticipatory thrill at the impending ripple effects that would soon cascade through their meticulously planned celebrations. Though I couldn't have foreseen how quickly the backlash would manifest in the form of Mom's frantic voicemail later that afternoon, her voice pitched higher than usual as she described the bank's automated alerts flagging the deposits and sending the wedding coordinator into a tailspin just as the first wave of out-of-town guests began arriving with their suitcases and expectations of flawless Midwestern hospitality. I let the message play out while driving to my next showing, a charming craftsman bungalow on the east side that reminded me of the stability I'd built for myself against all odds. And though part of me wrestled with a twinge of regret over potentially derailing what should have been Lisa's milestone amid the blooming dogwoods, and springtime optimism. The deeper truth was that this freeze represented more than financial maneuvering. It was a stand against the years of being painted as the family pariah for sins that were either exaggerated or entirely fabricated. Like the whispers about my interfering in Lisa's relationships that had circulated at Aunt Clara's last reunion. And as I pulled into the driveway to greet the eager buyers, my phone lit up again with a text from an unfamiliar local number claiming to be the florist's assistant inquiring about confirmation delays due to payment holds, a subtle clue that the vendor network in our tight-knit community was already abuzz with the irregularities, setting the stage for complications that would make their laughter from earlier that day taste bitterly ironic when the full scope of the unraveling began to unfold in the hours leading up to the rehearsal. Reflecting on the tangled web of our family history always transports me back to that sweltering summer about 10 years earlier when Lisa and I were both forging our paths through the uncertainties of our early 30s in the sprawling suburbs of Central Ohio. A time when I was piecing together the fragments of my life after the divorce that had left me questioning every foundation I'd once trusted, throwing myself into building a real estate career that demanded long hours of networking at Chamber of Commerce mixers and late nights poring over market analyses to secure my first independent listings, while Lisa flitted from one entry-level job to the next, her free-spirited lifestyle often landing her in predicaments that required intervention from someone reliable like me, such as the occasion when she totaled her beat-up sedan after a night out with friends from the local bar scene. And I stepped in without hesitation by wiring her the funds to cover the repairs and insurance deductible, because blood ties meant swallowing pride and extending a hand even when it strained your own budget already stretched thin from alimony payments and startup costs for my fledgling agency. Mom, Evelyn, had cultivated this dynamic from our childhood days in the modest ranch house on Elm Street, where she doted excessively on Lisa's dramatic flair for storytelling during dinner table recaps of school escapades, positioning her as the vibrant center of attention while subtly undermining my more reserved achievements like straight-A report cards or soccer team captaincies by dismissing them as predictable and unexciting, a pattern that intensified after Dad's unexpected passing from complications related to his factory job's toll on his health, leaving her to channel all her emotional energy into propping up Lisa as the family's shining hope while casting me in the role of the steady but burdensome supporter whose efforts were taken for granted until they became inconvenient to acknowledge. It all reached a boiling point during that fateful incident when Lisa's then-boyfriend discovered inconsistencies in her explanations for a joint bank account shortfall that she had dipped into for an impromptu weekend getaway to Chicago without his knowledge. And rather than letting her face the fallout alone, I mediated a tense conversation over coffee at our favorite spot near the mall, advising her on how to come clean transparently to salvage the relationship, only for her to later reinterpret the entire episode to Mom and our extended relatives as me meddling aggressively and exacerbating the conflict to assert some misguided superiority. A fabrication that snowballed into the enduring label of me as the drama instigator who couldn't resist inserting herself into others' lives, conveniently erasing the context of my protective intentions and the financial lifelines I'd extended on multiple occasions, including co-signing a loan for her first apartment lease when her credit history disqualified her independently. That night, after the initial shock of Mom's voicemail about the frozen payment had settled into a restless determination to unearth the roots of their animosity, I delved into the archives of my email account on the old desktop computer in my home office, the screen's glow illuminating stacks of unsorted paperwork from recent closings, and stumbled upon a thread from 5 years prior where Lisa had vented in a rare moment of candor to a mutual friend about her simmering jealousy over how I'd transformed the ashes of my failed marriage into a thriving business that afforded me vacations to the Smoky Mountains and a sense of self-sufficiency she openly envied, admitting that watching me succeed, where she faltered, ignited a resentment she struggled to suppress. Yet instead of addressing it head-on through honest dialogue, she had channeled it into subtle sabotages like bad-mouthing my professional advice at family functions or aligning with Mom's narrative to portray my independence as selfishness, Revelations that hit me with the force of a long-overdue epiphany, explaining why my offers to contribute to the wedding beyond mere financial support, such as helping scout venues during a weekend road trip, had been rebuffed with curt dismissals. Armed with this fresh perspective on the undercurrents of envy that had poisoned our bond, and with the payment freeze already sending ripples through the vendor communications as evidenced by the follow-up inquiries flooding Mom's inbox, I resolved to amplify the discomfort in a manner that stayed true to my penchant for understated retaliation, creating an anonymous email address through a free service that masked my IP and crafting a message to the reception hall's events coordinator, detailing concerns about the reliability of the funding source based on industry whispers of bounced preliminary checks, phrasing it just ambiguously enough to prompt them into delaying shipments of linens and centerpieces without implicating anyone directly, a move that promised to inject logistical headaches into their preparations and force Lisa to confront the vulnerabilities in her grand vision of matrimonial perfection, all while I maintained plausible deniability from the comfort of my living room couch, nursing a glass of Cabernet and allowing a wry smile to creep across my face at the thought of her scrambling to reassure suppliers amid the mounting pressure that mirrored the emotional burdens I'd carried silently for years. The satisfaction of this calculated nudge was tempered by an undercurrent of introspection about whether such tit-for-tat maneuvers were elevating me above the pettiness I despised in them or merely perpetuating a cycle of familial discord that had already cost me dear friendships and holiday invitations. Yet as the evening wore on with notifications pinging about confirmation holds from the bakery and photographer, the immediate gratification outweighed the doubts, until my phone vibrated once more with a direct message from Mike, Lisa's affable fiancé, whom I'd met briefly at a backyard cookout last fall. His words carefully worded to express that he recalled our casual conversation over drinks during a mutual acquaintance's birthday gathering and suspected there were layers to the family lore beyond the surface-level tales he'd been fed, proposing a discreet meetup to discuss before the situation spiraled further out of control. Deciding to reach out to Aunt Clara after Mike's intriguing message lingered in my inbox like an unsolved puzzle piece proved to be a pivotal shift in how I viewed the entrenched favoritism that had defined our family interactions for as long as I could remember. Her invitation to meet at the No Frills Diner, tucked away on the outskirts of Springfield where the pie slices were generous and the booths offered a semblance of privacy amid the clatter of silverware and murmured conversations from truckers and locals alike, allowing us to delve into the underbelly of Evelyn's parenting style that always seemed to elevate Lisa to untouchable status, while relegating me to the periphery of emotional investment. A dynamic Clara attributed to Mom's own unresolved insecurities stemming from her youth in a large Irish Catholic household where she, as the middle child, learned to curry favor through dramatic displays rather than quiet confidence, patterns she had unwittingly replicated by indulging Lisa's every whim, from lavish birthday parties in our teenage years to overlooking her minor legal scrapes in adulthood while scrutinizing my every decision post-divorce as if it were a personal affront to the family's image in our conservative community. Clara's revelations flowed freely over second cups of coffee, her voice lowered conspiratorially as she recounted how the seeds of my so-called drama-causing reputation were sown during the turbulent months following my separation from Mark, when Lisa had eavesdropped on a heated phone argument with my attorney about asset division and custody arrangements for our shared dog rather than children, embellishing the details in retellings to mutual acquaintances by implying I'd fabricated infidelity claims against him to gain leverage, a complete inversion of the truth where he'd been the one straying with his coworker from the auto parts supplier, and Mom, eager to maintain a facade of unity for the neighborhood bridge club gossip, had amplified the distortion by confiding in church friends that my instability was the root cause of the marriage's collapse, thereby justifying her gradual withdrawal of support, like excluding me from the annual Easter brunch planning or rerouting inheritance discussions to favor Lisa's future stability. A twist that landed with the weight of betrayal because it explained why even casual invitations to family game nights had dried up, leaving me to navigate holidays solo with takeout and Netflix marathons that masked the loneliness with superficial distractions. Absorbing this information amid the diner's aroma of frying bacon and fresh-baked rolls stirred a complex brew of validation and self-reproach within me. Validation for the instincts that had kept me at arm's length from deeper entanglements, and self-reproach for not challenging the narrative sooner. Perhaps by confronting Lisa during one of those strained phone calls about wedding guest lists where she'd hem and haw about space constraints, because while the audience in my mind, those pragmatic Midwestern women from my book club who valued resilience over grudges, might applaud the clarity it brought, they could just as easily frown upon how I'd internalized the isolation, allowing it to erode my confidence in subtle ways like second-guessing offers to mentor young agents at work for fear of seeming overbearing. With the rehearsal dinner approaching and the anonymous email to the coordinator already bearing fruit in the form of delayed RSVPs from key vendors who cited verification issues in their replies to Mom's increasingly desperate follow-ups, I channeled the fresh outrage into a more public yet veiled form of retaliation. Logging into a secondary social media account I'd created years ago for browsing real estate trends without personal entanglements and posting a series of innocuous memes about the pitfalls of overextended event planning in small-town Ohio, each one laced with humorous jabs at brides who bit off more than they could chew financially, complete with cartoonish illustrations of crumbling wedding cakes and frantic coordinators juggling IOUs that resonated with the local feed's algorithm to garner shares among the very circles connected to the venue, like the wives of the groom's co-workers at the steel mill and the PTA moms from Lisa's old high school, turning the content into a light-hearted cautionary tale that amused the community without a single direct reference to the Thompsons, yet close enough in timing and detail to sow seeds of speculation that would reach her ears through the grapevine of Facebook groups dedicated to regional celebrations. The witty undercurrent of these posts, drawing from my own experiences closing deals under budget constraints, provided a cathartic outlet that had me chuckling softly at my desk as notifications rolled in with amused comments about "Sounds like my cousin's fiasco last year," a clever diffusion of the tension that empowered me without descending into outright malice, though it planted a nagging unease about crossing into the territory of the very manipulative storytelling I'd resented in them, especially as the evening progressed with reports from a nosy neighbor who texted me updates on the growing vendor hesitancy filtering back to the family. That unease crystallized into outright confrontation when my phone rang midway through a quiet dinner of stir-fry and reality TV, the caller ID showing Lisa's number for the first time in months, her voice a whirlwind of accusation and hysteria describing how the rehearsal dinner had devolved into pandemonium with the caterer arriving understaffed and the string quartet threatening to pack up over unsettled balances, pinning the blame squarely on me as the shadowy orchestrator despite my confirmed absence from the event, demanding in tearful rage that I reverse whatever sabotage I'd engineered or face permanent exile from any future family milestones. Her words hanging in the air like a gauntlet thrown down just as Mike's earlier message buzzed in again, urging an immediate response to what he called the real story behind it all. Waking up to the patter of relentless rain against my bedroom window on what was meant to be the pinnacle of Lisa's matrimonial dreams filled me with a mix of reluctant anticipation and creeping remorse that had me lingering under the covers longer than usual. The gray skies over Dayton mirroring the turbulent swirl of emotions churning inside as I replayed the fallout from the rehearsal dinner in my mind, where her accusations had echoed through the phone line like accusations from a courtroom. Drama I'd unwittingly scripted, yet even as guilt nipped at the edges of my resolve for having set those anonymous wheels in motion with emails and memes that amplified the vendor paranoia, the deeper part of me clung to the justification that their exclusion had invited this reciprocal disruption. A fair exchange in the ledger of family debts where I'd tallied years of overlooked contributions from co-signing loans to mediating Mom's health scares during Dad's absence. Driving toward the church. Under the steady downpour that turned the highways into slick ribbons reflecting taillights from commuter traffic heading to weekend errands, I positioned myself in a discreet spot across the street, The old binoculars from a long-forgotten hiking trip pressed to my eyes as elegantly attired guests hurried inside with umbrellas blooming like mismatched flowers. Their chatter about the weather masking the undercurrents of tension I'd helped foster through the financial freeze and subtle leaks that had left the event teetering on the brink of cancellation, threats from suppliers demanding cash on delivery, and though watching from this voyeuristic distance felt absurdly clandestine, like something out of a low-budget thriller, Mike's unanswered message from the previous night pulled me here with its promise of hidden truths that might reframe the entire saga of my vilification. He emerged shortly after the organ music swelled faintly through the rain-streaked glass, ducking under the awning for a hurried cigarette that gave him the cover to scan the lot until his gaze locked on my car, waving me over with a gesture that blended urgency and sheepishness, and once we huddled in the vestibule away from prying eyes, he confessed in a hushed rush the detail that had haunted our interactions for years. A fleeting romantic entanglement during the raw aftermath of my divorce, when loneliness had led to a single night of comfort at his apartment after a mutual friends gathering. Nothing more than a momentary lapse amid the wreckage of my self-esteem that Lisa had discovered through a misplaced text and weaponized mercilessly by portraying it as a deliberate seduction aimed at undermining her budding relationship with him, twisting the innocent vulnerability into a scandalous betrayal that she fed to Mom and the family network to solidify my image as the predatory sibling who couldn't resist sabotaging her happiness. A revelation that landed like a thunderclap amid the distant hymns, because it not only explained the sudden chill in holiday invitations and the whispers at community events, but also forced me to confront how my own guarded silences had allowed the lie to metastasize unchecked, leaving me grappling with the dilemma of whether to storm in and demand accountability or let the day's unraveling serve as poetic justice for the distortions they'd perpetuated. The audience I'd imagined tuning into this personal unraveling, those everyday folks from my age bracket navigating their own relational minefields at PTA meetings or office potlucks, might shake their heads at my hesitation, urging a bolder confrontation over these simmering revenges that risked entangling me further in the toxicity. Yet the pull of unresolved curiosity kept me rooted as Mike slipped back inside with vague assurances of smoothing things over post-ceremony, prompting me to redirect my focus to the reception venue a short drive away, where the real opportunity for a parting shot awaited in the form of the outdated sound system I'd scoped out during a feigned inquiry call weeks earlier. Slipping through a service entrance with the borrowed access code from a disgruntled bartender who'd overheard the payment gripes at the local tavern and sympathized with tales of stiffed tips, I navigated the dimly lit prep area past stacks of folding chairs and half-assembled floral arches, my heart pounding with the thrill of intrusion as I interfaced with the laptop controlling the playlist, inserting a curated sequence of Lisa's most mortifying anthems from her college mixtapes, those over-the-top power ballads about lost loves and empowerment that she'd belted out embarrassingly at karaoke nights before swearing us to secrecy, programmed to interrupt the sophisticated jazz during key moments like the father-daughter dance and best man toasts, transforming the elegant affair into a parade of awkward nostalgia that would have guessed stifling laughs behind champagne flutes. While Lisa's composed facade cracked under the weight of unintended hilarity, a witty infusion of irony that paid homage to the times she'd ridiculed my own post-divorce playlists as desperate therapy, all executed with the precision of someone who debugged enough real estate software glitches to handle basic hacks without leaving traces. As I exited into the drizzle with a sense of closure washing over the lingering guilt, the envelope thrust into my hands by a harried usher at the church steps caught me off guard. Its plain white surface inscribed with my name in unfamiliar script and sealed with an air of finality that hinted at revelations far weightier than the day's petty interferences. The corner peeking out to reveal the edge of a faded photograph depicting Mom in an embrace with a stranger whose face stirred vague memories from old family albums, addressed directly to me just as the vows echoed faintly from within, promising a secret that could shatter the fragile remnants of our shared history. gripping the envelope with fingers that trembled slightly from the chill of the rain-soaked air outside the reception hall, where distant laughter mingled uneasily with the strains of those sabotaged songs filtering through the walls. I retreated to the anonymity of my car parked under a sprawling oak whose leaves rustled like whispered warnings, tearing open the seal to reveal a stack of yellowed photographs and a handwritten note in a script that matched no one in my immediate circle. The images capturing Mom in moments of unguarded intimacy with a man whose features aligned with the shadowy figure from my childhood vacations to Lake Erie. His arm draped possessively around her waist in snapshots dated precisely to the year preceding Dad's decline, a timeline that intertwined devastatingly with the onset of her campaign to recast me as the family's disruptive force, suggesting she had projected her own marital fractures onto my emerging independence to deflect scrutiny from the affair. That must have contributed to the household tensions culminating in his premature departure from us all. The note, penned with urgent scrawl, came from Aunt Clara, who admitted to unearthing the evidence from Mom's attic during a recent visit under the pretense of sorting keepsakes, her words urging me to use it as leverage to demand the truth behind the years of favoritism and fabrications that had isolated me. A bombshell that reshaped the narrative of my exclusion, not as mere sibling rivalry, but as a calculated smokescreen to safeguard Evelyn's secrets, forcing me to replay every barbed comment and sidelined invitation through this lens of deception. Like the way she deflected questions about Dad's final arguments by blaming my teenage rebellions, or how Lisa's jealousy had been nurtured as a convenient ally in maintaining the illusion of a flawless maternal legacy. This discovery ignited a fury laced with profound sorrow for the innocence we'd all lost in the crossfire, making me question the wisdom of my incremental revenges that had chipped away at the wedding's facade, because while they offered fleeting empowerment, they paled against the systemic betrayal now laid bare. And as the reception's playlist hiccuped into another embarrassing track that elicited muffled groans from within, I felt the audience of my conscience, those relatable souls from bridge clubs and PTA circuits who prized family above all, wincing at how my path of witty retaliations might have blinded me to earlier opportunities for direct confrontation, potentially deepening the rifts rather than mending them through uncomfortable honesty that could have surfaced these truths sooner. Mike's reappearance at my window, his suit rumpled and tie askew from navigating the indoor chaos, added another layer of ambiguity to the unfolding drama as he slid into the passenger seat uninvited, his explanations tumbling out in a defensive torrent about why he'd remained silent on our past indiscretion. Despite knowing Lisa's distortions, claiming loyalty to the family unit had tied his hands until the vendor crises forced his hand. Yet his evasive glances toward the hall and reluctance to commit to exposing the affair photos outright left me doubting whether his overtures stemmed from genuine remorse or a strategic bid to position himself as the hero in whatever reconciliation might salvage his marriage, a twist that heightened the dilemmas swirling in my mind about trusting anyone in this web of half-truths where loyalties shifted like the wind off the Scioto. With the rain intensifying into a steady drumbeat on the roof that isolated us in this confessional bubble, I resolved on a final, comprehensive severance that encapsulated all the clever barbs I'd deployed thus far. Pulling out my phone to compose a group message that attached blurred thumbnails of the envelope's contents accompanied by a terse declaration withdrawing every thread of support from joint holiday funds to emotional availability, effectively stranding them amid the evaporating festivities as cops arrived to mediate disputes with irate suppliers over the frozen assets and incomplete payments. My words crafted to sting with the precision of a closing argument in one of my real estate negotiations, leaving no room for rebuttal before I blocked the numbers en masse and drove away into the blurring taillights of the interstate. The satisfaction of this ultimate disengagement washing over me like the wipers clearing the windshield, a witty capstone to the saga that handed them the full weight of their deceptions to bear without my buffering presence. Yet, as the miles accumulated toward the familiar outline of my solitary home, doubts infiltrated the triumph like cracks in fresh pavement. pondering whether this cascade of revenges had liberated me from the toxic cycle or merely erected higher walls around a heart already scarred by the losses, leaving open the enigmas of whether Lisa would ever pierce her denial to acknowledge her role in the manipulations, if Mom's hidden life would compel a belated atonement that bridged the gulf, or even if Mike's ambiguous affections hinted at possibilities beyond the familial fray. Questions that lingered unresolved in the quiet aftermath, inviting reflection on the true cost of standing firm against those who shaped your origins, a thought-provoking void where closure remained just out of reach amid the fading echoes of what might have been a different kind of family legacy.